Aloha, everybody. Welcome back. I checked this out earlier, and Ezra Kline answers Lex Friedman in a way that I've answered people before, and it was almost verbatim. So I want to cover this. So let's check out Lex Friedman asking Ezra Kline about left versus right.
You are both firmly on the left of the U.S. political spectrum. Ezra, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. You're often referred to, at least I think of you as, one of the most intellectually rigorous voices on the left. Can you define the ideals and the vision of the American left?
Oh, good. We're starting small here.
And maybe contrast them with the American right.
Sure. So the thing I should say here is that you can define the left in different ways. I think the left has a couple fundamental views. One is that life is unfair. We are born with different talents. We are born into different nations, right? The luck of being born into America is very different than the luck of being born into Venezuela. We are born into different families. We have luck operating as an omnipresence across our entire lives. And as such, the people for whom it works out well, we don't deserve all of that. We got lucky. I mean, we also worked hard and we also had talent and we also applied that talent. But at a very fundamental level, that we are sitting here is unfair. And that so many other people are in conditions that are much worse, much more precarious, much more exploited is unfair. And one of the fundamental roles of government should not necessarily be to turn that unfairness into perfect equality, but to rectify that unfairness into a kind of universal dignity, right? So people can have lives of flourishing. So I'd say that's one thing. The left is fundamentally more skeptical of capitalism, and particularly unchecked forms of capitalism, than the right. I always think this is hard to talk about because what we call...
Well, if you watch me, you know I don't think you can really check capitalism. I think capitalism is basically unchecked and will always be unchecked. It's for the 1% or 10% maybe, but it's only really for the top few.
Call unchecked capitalism is nevertheless very much supported by government. So I think in a way you have both. Like, markets are things that are enforced by government. Whether they are, how you set the rules of them is what ends up differing between the left and the right. But the left tends to be more worried about the fact that you could get rich building coal-fired power plants, belching pollution into the air, and you could get rich laying down solar panels, and the market doesn't know the difference between.
See, I was going to say something about the market set up between left and right. So the right would set up the market due to capitalism, money first. The invisible hand will set up everything that needs to be done by supply and demand, by market forces. The left would set it up through an equation of how many people do we have, how much resources do we have, what are the needs, and we're going to divide it out, and then the extra we can kind of play with, and people who do more get more type of stuff or whatever. But like, there'd be a basic needs met on the left, where on the right it's you always have the opportunity to do more, but everybody can't exercise every opportunity, or everybody can't, there won't be enough opportunities for everybody.
The two. And so there's a set of goals about regulating the unchecked potential of capitalism that also relates to sort of exploitation of workers. There's like very fundamental questions about how much people get paid, how much power they have. Again, the rectification of economic and other forms of power is very fundamental to the left. When you think about what the minimum wage is, I am a successful podcast host. When I go into a negotiation with the New York Times, I have a certain amount of market power in that negotiation because other firms want to hire me. When you are a minimum wage worker, the reason we have a minimum wage is in part to rectify a power problem. A lot of workers do not have market power. They do not have a bunch of job opportunities. They are not working with firms. And by the way, without certain kinds of regulation, those firms would cartelize and make it so they can hold down wages anyway. So trying to rectify power imbalances is, I think, another thing folks on the left take more seriously. That would be a start of things that I think broadly unite maybe let's call it the intuitions. I want to say that's a podcast answer, not a book. I'm sure I left a million things out here, but I'll start there.
I mean, there's a lot of fascinating things there.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good for a podcast answer. Yeah, you could really go on forever. You could write a book about it, like you said. But I thought that was a pretty good podcast answer.
On the unfairness of life, that could be the interperson unfairness. So one person getting more money than another person, or more skills or more natural abilities than another person. And then there's just the general unfairness of the environment, the luck of the draw, the things that happen. All of a sudden you cross a street and the car runs a red light and runs you over and you're in the hospital. So that unfairness of life. And in general, I guess the left sees there's some role or a lot of role for government to help you when that unfairness strikes. And then maybe there's also a general notion.
So like something like that, if you're talking about running a red light, a general fairness rule would be like every car has a sensor and can't run into people. Like the brakes would just lock up once it got so close to people or whatever, something like that.
Of the size of government. I think the left is more comfortable with larger government as long as it's effective and efficient.
Right, as long as it's effective and efficient.
At least in this idea.
That's certainly true in the last 100 years. It was New Deal liberals who enlarged the government in the 1930s. It was Republicans who acquiesced.
So again, liberals are different than left. Liberals are on the right. Malcolm X, let's hit the pause real quick. So again, as I always say, liberals are not on the left.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox, and a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to, but the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling and you take him for a friend.
That is exactly what Democrats and liberals do. They show you their teeth. They're about to eat you, but you think it's a smile. They about to eat you. They ain't your friend. So when they talk about liberals, they're not talking about the left. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the Black Panthers will all tell you that liberals are some of the worst people. We'd rather than be on the right, be the wolf. I'd rather see Donald Trump. Donald Trump let you know who he is. He don't lie. He's right there just saying, I'm crazy, I will do this stuff. But then these liberals, they lying to you. They say, oh, we're going to be your friend, we're going to help you out. And they ain't.
Yes, to that larger government in the 1950s. And then starting in the 1970s, 1980s, it's typically been conservatives who've tried to constrict government. Sometimes they failed, while liberals have typically tried to expand, certainly, taxing and spending. But one thing that I was thinking as Ezra was talking, and I was just writing this down because I thought Ezra's answer was really lovely, but like at a really high level, I thought, maybe you disagree with this. I thought about distinguishing between liberals and conservatives based on three factors: what each side fears, what each side values, and what each side tolerates. I
wish they would actually talk about the left. Like, liberals and conservatives are still just both on the right, but we'll see where they go from here.
Liberals fear injustice, and conservatives often fear cultural radicalism or the destruction of society. And as a result, they value different things. Liberals, I think, tend to value change. And at the level of government, that can mean change in terms of creating new programs that don't previously exist. It's typically been liberals, for example, who've been trying to expand health coverage, while conservatives have tried to cut it back. Just in the last few years, it was Biden who tried to add a bunch of programs, whether it was infrastructure, the Chips and Science Act.
Yeah, but they don't really add much. They just they tweak it, which is not really doing anything for anybody. They're not doing left-wing things. So liberals, liberals are not left. Gosh.
The IRA, and then Trump comes into office and is unwinding it. And then I also think they tolerate different things. I think liberals are more likely to tolerate a little bit of overreach, a little bit of radicalism in terms of trying to push society into a world where it hasn't been. Well, I think conservatives are more likely to tolerate injustice. They're more likely to say there's a kind of natural inequality in the nature of the world, and we're not going to try to overcorrect for it with our policies. And so I think that even at a layer above what Ezra was articulating with the policy differences between liberals and conservatives, there's almost like an archetypal difference between what they fear and value and tolerate. Liberals fearing injustice, seeking change, tolerating sometimes a bit of what people might think of as overreach, while conservatives fear that overreach, value tradition, and often tolerate injustice.
So that made me just think of something a little bit new, maybe. Conservatives understanding that there's going to be injustice, what they do is they make sure that they're at the top of the injustice ladder. Like they're going to have the least injustices, and they'd rather make sure that other people will have to go through the injustices than themselves. Where liberals the same, but the left is different. The left tries to end injustices for other people, where they will take some of the pain from other people to try to lessen the pain for them. That's a huge difference in the left and right. Now, liberals, again, on the right, but if we're actually talking left and right, the left will try to alleviate pain and even take some of the pain to try to alleviate it from you.
The only thing I would say is that I do think this sort of the left likes big government, the right likes small government oversimplifies. The left is pretty comfortable with an expansive government that is trying to correct for some of the imbalances of power and injustices and imbalances of luck I talked about earlier. The right is very comfortable with a very powerful police and surveillance and national security state.
Right, yep.
I always think about the sort of George W. Bush era, although right now with ICE agents hassling all kinds of green card holders.
And the right wants to be in your bedroom. They want to know what you're doing and what gender you claim to be and who you're having sex with or not having sex with. And the left doesn't care about all that. So we stay out of your business, your personal business. The right wants to be in your personal business.
You can think about this moment too. But the right's view that on the one hand, the government is incompetent, and on the other hand, we could send our army across oceans, invade Afghanistan and Iraq, and then rebuild these societies we don't understand into fully functioning liberal democracies that will be our allies, was an extraordinary.
That is a good call. The right does talk about how our government is so bad, but always wants to go to war and fight everybody and send our military everywhere, pump gas up our military. But who leads our military? Our government. So if our government is inept and not smart, wouldn't our military be inept and not smart? We're just getting our... Just because we're good at killing doesn't mean we know who to kill. We shouldn't really be killing anybody.
Extraordinary level of trust in a very big government. I mean, that was expensive. That took manpower. That was compared to we're going to set up, the Affordable Care Act in America. That took a lot more faith in the U.S. government being able to do something that was extraordinarily difficult. But the left has more confidence in the government of the check, and the right has more confidence in the government of the gun.
You're right. There's some degree to which when the right speaks about the size of government, it's a little.
But the gun costs money, so still the government of the gun through the check. No matter what you're doing through the government, it takes a check. The right just doesn't mind spending to kill people for whatever reason. I don't know, why they want to just send people to war and oil resources, right? So we take resources,
A bit rhetoric, and not actual policy, because they seem to always grow the size of government anyway. They just kind of say small government, but they don't. It's in the surveillance state, in the foreign policy in terms of military involvement abroad, and really in every program, they're not very good at cutting either. They just kind of like to say it.
Cutting is really hard. Government spends trillions of dollars, and if you cut billions of dollars, someone is going to feel that pain and they're going to scream. And so you look at defense spending under Reagan, you look at overall spending under Reagan. Reagan might be one of the most archetypally conservative presidents of the last 40, 50 years. He utterly failed in his attempt to shrink government. Government grew under Reagan. Defense grew, all sorts of programs grew. So I think that one thing we're sort of scrambling around in our answers is that at a really high level, there are differences between liberalism and conservatism in American history, but often at the level of implementation.
There's not as much differences in liberalism and conservatism. There's a lot of differences in liberalism, conservatism, and the left. The progressives are very different than liberals.
It can be a little bit messy. Even Bush's foreign policy that Ezra was describing, sort of from a big sense of American history, is very Wilsonian, right? This sense of it's America's duty to go out and change the world.
Or to use a current example, McKinleyan.
Or McKinleyan, right. And a lot of people compare Donald Trump's foreign policy to Andrew Jackson. This sense of we need to pull back from the world, America first. We need to care about what's inside of our borders and care much less about what's outside of our borders. Sometimes the differences between Republican and Democrat administrations don't fall cleanly into the lines of liberal versus conservative because those definitions can be mushy.
because there's not very much difference between liberals and conservatives. There's a very big difference between them and the left. I liked Ezra Kline's first answer. I didn't watch the whole video. I just watched his answer to what the left versus right was, and then I turned it off so I could just watch it here. I thought that was a pretty good video. Who was that? I think that was Ezra Kline. What was that guy's name? I can't think of it right now. But if I can think of it, I'll put it in the description below. Yeah, so left versus right. There we go. But left is more wanting to organize society through needs. The right thinks that that can't happen. That men or that people can't account for what everyone's needs are, and so that the only way to do that is through the invisible hand of the market, through capitalism and moneyism. That's the biggest disagreement that I really think, and I guess you would know that if you watch across the spectrum.